As I've listened to the stories of thousands of women of all ages, in all kinds of stages, through the years, I've kept their stories locked in the vault of my heart. I feel as if they've been walking around with me all through these years. They've bothered me, they've prodded me, and sometimes kept me up at night. Ultimately, they've increased my passion to reframe and reimagine the powerful positions of mother and matriarch within the family system. I'm a problem solver, so I set out to find a way to perhaps change the trajectory of this silent and sad scenario about a dynamic yet untapped source of potential and purpose sitting in our homes and churches. It is time to come to the table, Heartlifters, and unleash the power of maternal presence into the world. Welcome to Mothering for the Ages, our 2025 theme here on today's Heartlift. I'm Janelle. I am your guide here on this heartlifting journey. I invite you to grab a pen, a journal, and a cup of something really delicious. May today's conversation give you clarity, courage, and a revived sense of camaraderie. You see, you're not on this journey alone. We are unified as Heartlifters and committed to bringing change into the world, one heart at a time. Hello, Heartlifters. Guess what? We have one of our favorites. Yes, we do. One of our favorites is back, Erin Lynum, and she is here to talk about the book that was only in process back in June of 2024 when Erin and I talked on episodes 278, 279. Welcome back, Erin. Here you are.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
We're here to talk about the nature of rest, what the Bible and creation teach us about Sabbath living. And the cover, as I just told you, is breathtaking. It has simplicity, but then it has that hummingbird on it. And so I am not holding a real book yet. It doesn't come out until May. Perfect for Mom's Day, for Mother's Day, I will add, and Father's Day. But I remember when you told me the working title was The Nature of Rest and how full that is with meaning, right? Because you love nature and you have that video but something we didn't talk about last time, which I just learned, I'm not sure if it was even part of our conversation. I don't remember, but that you were diagnosed at age 14 with Addison's disease. I really don't think we talked about this.
I don't think we did either, no.
So talk to me now. How did that, I guess the question is, why now? Why now are you bringing out this revelation about your struggles as a teenager with this disease? I'm not sure anyone even knows what Addison's disease is. So maybe tell us that, and then how that led you here.
Yeah, let's start there with what Addison's disease is, because it's a very unknown disease. It actually was only discovered, I believe, in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And so when I was 14, I was preparing to go overseas for the first time to Africa for 2 months.
Oh.
And
2 months? What were you doing?
It was a missions trip. So I was with a group of teenagers and adult leaders whom I had never met in my life. And I had never been on an airplane. Wow. And my first flight was to Ethiopia. So that alone was just crazy.
Flight. Yes. That's a long journey of flights.
But so, it really is. So a few months before the trip, you got to go in and get a regular checkup at the doctor and travel vaccines. But when you walk into a doctor's office, and I had no weird health history, it was just a checkup. But what does the nurse do? She checks your vitals. And those are the first red flags to if something's wrong. And when she checked my blood pressure that day, it was 56/48.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was the lowest. My doctor later told us this. It was the lowest he had ever seen in a living person.
Wow.
And so right away we know, okay, well, something is off. And my parents had noted, she's been a bit lethargic, a little dizzy, but they kind of chalked it up to adolescence and
puberty
changes. Right. So we really hadn't thought much of it until this moment. So I saw some specialists and we're digging into it. They test me for anemia. No, it's not that. Well, my
Oh,
father is a
yeah.
researcher. And so
Oh,
he starts just digging into articles, trying to figure out what is going on with his daughter. And he finds Addison's disease, also known as adrenal insufficiency. And so he
yes.
mentions it to my doctor, and my doctor says, "Oh, no, people don't get that, especially adolescents." But he still sent me to an endocrinologist for some tests.
Good.
And sure enough, that's what it was. So my father actually is who led us to that diagnosis.
That's
And so what
amazing.
Addison's disease is your adrenal glands no longer function.
Mm,
And most times, and probably in my case, it's an autoimmune disorder. So your
mhm.
immune system, which is supposed to protect your body, gets really confused and sees
Yes.
something that's supposed to be there and thinks, actually, I'm going to attack that. So my own body attacked my adrenal
Turn.
glands until
Hmm.
they were no longer functioning.
Hmm.
And at this point, they think I probably had it about a year. And so my adrenal glands have not worked for over 2 decades. And barring a miracle, they won't until I have a new body. And so
Wow. Because,
they,
if I'm right, because I had adrenal insufficiency, not
Mhm.
to the degree of that, just from overdrive, because I'm an
Yeah.
overdriver, I think, and probably some trauma in there. So, Heartlifter, let's just take a moment to really understand what the adrenal glands do. Because back in the day when I had my own adrenal insufficiencies happening, I had no idea that there are these suprarenal glands that are small and triangular shaped that are on top of both of our kidneys. They produce hormones that help regulate our metabolism, our immune system, blood pressure, our response to stress, and other essential functions. And they produce adrenaline, cortisol, so many of these major hormones in our bodies that help us move through our life more wholeheartedly and more present and actually feeling well. So I really just wanted to highlight this portion of my conversation with Erin because it is so important that as women who are mothering, that we make sure that our adrenals are working well. Okay, back to Erin.
Yeah, they control so
They
much
do.
of your
Right.
hormones, which are very important.
Yes.
And so they produce, of course, adrenaline, but one
Yes.
of the main hormones they produce is cortisol, and that's your stress hormone. And so that's what God designed us with to really deal with any stress, physical, mental, spiritual. And
Mm.
so a normal person with functioning adrenal glands, when they face stress, their body produces more cortisol to cope with that. It's
Yeah.
your fight or flight response. My
Mm-hmm.
body cannot do that. And so,
Erin.
yeah, so I have to take replacement hormones every day. Thank the Lord, through a lot of natural medicine and diet and exercise, I've gotten those to as low as they can be. But
Wow.
in the case of extreme stress,
Right.
my body would, instead of fighting that, producing cortisol, it would fail and go into a coma, and then it's fatal. And so I have an emergency kit with me at all times. Thankfully, I've actually never had to use it. God
Oh,
has been
thank you,
really good in this
Jesus.
diagnosis. But
Yes.
that is, yeah, what it is. And so, really, stress at 14 years old, stress became deadly to me. And so, my parents began coaching me in identifying stress in my life, stepping back from it, and really prayerfully just bringing all of it to the Lord.
Oh, good parents. Wow.
Yes.
So is that completely genetic? Or are there like were you really stressed out at 14? What do doctors say are precursors? Something that we should look for.
Mhm. Yeah, they're unsure if it's genetic.
Mm-hmm.
When this all started and we were doing research again, it's a newly discovered disease. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
JFK had it. That's a little known fact
Oh,
about JFK.
hmm.
But they, at first, what I would read was it's not genetic. I don't believe it's genetic in my family. But then
Mm-hmm.
I found some studies of where parents had it and then their children had it.
Okay.
So there's some evidence that it might be. In most
Mm-hmm.
cases, it really is just autoimmune where your
Mm-hmm.
body is confused. In
Mm-hmm.
some other cases, it is trauma. And so your body is so stressed over something
Yeah.
that it's overdrive. And so a lot of people, like you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
yourself,
Yeah.
many people deal with adrenal fatigue or
Yes,
burnout.
that's exactly
And
what
then
I
the
had.
extreme case of that is Addison's
Addison's
disease.
disease. So if you're not paying attention at that
Yeah.
point, let's say if I hadn't paid attention.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was interesting because back in, my day, we had no internet or any of those types of things, but we had radio. And so Dr. Archibald Hart was on the Focus on the Family radio show, and he wrote a book about adrenaline fatigue and adrenal
Oh,
fatigue and
wow.
why is your child so stressed? And I had three little ones and twins, and I was so stressed. And so I read that book. I mean, I wish I had it because it was falling apart. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
all I had to know. I was like, oh, adrenals, had no idea. So I
Mhm.
understand the gravity of that situation. So
Yeah.
from what I'm reading, that led you, like you said, to rest.
Hmm.
So if you didn't rest or find out what rest looked like as a 14-year-old, you know, I don't know even, I mean, did you go on your trip?
I did. That
You
is a crazy
did.
part. I did. And goodness, I wish I could remember the exact dates. I think I was diagnosed in
Wow.
February, and then I left for the trip. It would have been maybe May. But it was crazy because in the doctor's office, as I'm being diagnosed, the first question that my parents had for the doctor was, can she still go to Africa? This is how great their faith was because
That's
they
right.
truly believed that God had put it in my heart to go to Africa because I was such a homesick. I couldn't even sleep at my friend's house down the street. I was so homesick.
No kidding.
So, such a picky eater. I only ate like a few things. So, my parents were shocked I even wanted to go to Africa. But
Right.
God had placed on my heart to go and to tell people about him. And it led to future trips overseas.
Oh,
It led to
wow.
going to a Bible college for missions work where I met my husband. And now we do
Yes.
ministry in a very different way than we anticipated. But I can
Sure.
see how God was lining up those things and how it started with my parents' faith asking, can she still go? So
Can
they
she still
they put
go?
everything in place. They trained my leaders. They made sure I had all my medication, emergency kits. They even got
Yeah.
me helicopter evac insurance in case I would need to be,
Wonderful.
rescued or something. Yeah.
You're in
But they were
Ethiopia, for
so
heaven's sakes. Yes.
yes. But they were so confident
Mhm.
that the Lord had me, and we worked closely with my doctors.
It's
And
beautiful.
yeah, yeah,
It's encouraging, hopeful, and beautiful because I think your next children's book, maybe even, board book should be Can I Still Go? No, I just think that's such
yeah,
a great Can I
yes,
Still Go? A story about
yeah,
faith and, just your struggle with a hidden disease, an invisible
yeah,
disease, they call those
yeah,
things. Yes.
yep,
Wow. Well, I love that. So, rest then. Why, how, where? It seems God has had his hand on your life to talk about this subject for a very long time in a very difficult situation. I like to say I'm an experiential writer. So I typically write from what I experience, and it sounds a little bit like perhaps what you're doing and having to learn about the nature of rest from adolescence. That's pretty tough. Yeah. So what did you learn? I'm curious.
yeah, yeah. So I couldn't have imagined back then that this is the work that the Lord would have me in.
Yes.
And even though I was learning by necessity to avoid stress,
Hmm.
I couldn't see yet that these were the steps He was taking me on toward Sabbath and biblical rest. And
Yeah.
so, really, that He was forming it all along. But it really came to
Yeah.
play 3 years ago so I have four children with my
Hmm.
husband, and we were driving one day, we were taking a road trip, and we listened to the audiobook by John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yes, we
And
talked
we
about
listened to
this.
it.
Yes. It's so good. It's right over
Oh my
there.
goodness, it's so good. And so we listened to it together, all of us. So we're all hearing this and gaining this new perspective on rest and time. And at the end of it, my husband and I were like, well, we can't not do that anymore. Like, we're homeschooling our four kids, running three businesses, definitely in burnout. And so we started Sabbathing right away. And it was so
Wow.
sweet because we Sabbath usually from Friday evening to Saturday evening. And the first Sabbath fell on January 1st. And so it was this sweet, just fresh start.
Very
And the
fresh.
Lord giving us this gift. Because I had tried Sabbath before and
Hmm.
failed, if you would say that, maybe
Yes.
Sabbath before, felt like I
Didn't do
failed.
so well. Right, I failed
Yeah.
my Sabbath test.
Yes. But I really think it was because I was viewing it wrongly. And it wasn't
Okay.
until I started viewing Sabbath as a celebration and as a gift from God and something that He gives us to fuel all of our work, to fill
Mhm.
us up, to inspire us, to refresh us. When I started seeing it that way, it completely changed the practice. Like, oh, this is something we get to do as a family.
Right, it's a privilege. So what does that look like? I know we talked a bit about it before from Rooted in Wonder, but it's bears repeating for me because I really do believe I should be implementing more Sabbath. So what does that look like then? Walk me through your
Yeah.
day of Sabbath as a family.
Yeah, I'll walk you through ours. First, I want to say Sabbath should look differently from family to family,
I love
depending on
that.
your situation and your schedule.
Sure.
For us, like a lot of people ask me, well, why don't you Sabbath on Sunday? That's kind of a
Hmm.
traditional, you hear that a lot. Well, as a mom with 4 kids, getting everyone up, maybe showered, dressed
Yes.
semi presentably, and to church is not restful.
Without a
It's
doubt. No.
Yeah, like it
Far
is
from restful.
very important. We love our church community, and that is for fellowship, for being together, for hearing from the word. But Sabbath for us is different. And so that's
Hmm.
why we chose Friday to Saturday. And
Oh,
so
I
on
love
Friday
that.
evenings, it's really celebratory. First, we kind of spend some time, and I'll tell you this, but I'll also tell you it's not the same every week. And it's a practice. You're
Right. It's
constantly
malleable.
trying to.
Correct. Yes.
So Friday afternoon is spent really just wrapping up. And so for me, I need to answer any lingering emails. So I'm
Okay.
not thinking about them. Then I put an away message on my email telling people, hey, I don't check my email on the weekends. We're celebrating Sabbath and a little blurb about it. And so that way I don't feel that pressure to check or answer any emails. In
Mm.
fact, if I do, then I'm just being hypocritical. And so it
Yes.
really gives me permission to put away
Very
my
personal.
computer.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a Sabbath mode on my phone. You can set focus mode so that I can really
Yes.
only hear from my mom in case of emergency.
Hmm.
Screens
Beautiful.
go away. We have an easy dinner that the kids aren't going to throw a fit over, tacos, pizza. A lot of times we'll have a good conversation around the table like, "Hey, what was your favorite part of the week or what was something
Mm-hmm.
hard that you faced this week?" Just good, meaningful conversation. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really just celebratory. So we might like toast with sparkling juice, and then
Oh,
we
it's so
always have
fun.
ice cream. And then after the kids go to bed, my husband and I just stay up and read books and have conversations because the screens are put
Yeah.
away.
No screens, no
And then
TV.
Saturday,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, and we're not working.
And you're not
Saturday
working.
morning,
What do we do with all this
mhm,
time? Right.
yeah, yeah. That's part of the hard part is
Hmm.
you're really learning how to be human again.
You are. Hmm.
And it can be uncomfortable. It will be at first
It
because you
will
want to
be
reach for that
very,
phone.
oh my heavens, it's our appendage. Yes.
Yeah.
What am I
Yeah, like
missing?
you don't
What am I
know what
missing?
to fill that
Right.
time with. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So people ask me like, "Well, how do you read so many books?" And I tell them Sabbath. That's what I fill so much of that time with. And
So
even
true.
people also ask me, "Do you work on Sabbath?" And I say, "Kind of in a way I do, but it's very different." Because the screens are away, it's not my normal work. Instead, I am reading and researching, which is a passion of mine. I'm
Hmm.
writing in my journal. And
Yeah.
so come Monday, I am ready to work because I've got these ideas that have been going around in my head all
Right.
weekend. So it's
Your
just
head must
very
be so
different.
full of ideas. I can only imagine.
I have to write them down
And
because
lots of
the
hummingbirds. Okay, can't
so
wait.
many
Keep going.
hummingbirds.
So many
So
hummingbirds.
Saturday morning, we sleep in. And I know I
Lovely.
just lost some moms that are listening because I have littles. And I will tell you, like,
Littles.
this was very
Correct.
trained. My youngest is 6 now. I have a teenager and almost teenager, so they're fine with sleeping in.
Oh,
But
yes.
it has been trained. And again, like
How?
it's
How
gonna
did
look
you train?
different.
Because I definitely talk a lot in my very first book
Hmm.
about order
Yeah.
and implementing a quiet time.
Yeah.
But, that's not easy to do. So I would love you to give any tips that you can to our little mamas
Yeah.
and of all ages and phases and stages, because I have all the time in the world now, in a sense,
Yeah.
and sometimes the empty space closes in on you. So there's a different,
Mhm.
it's different. But how do you implement that? How did you train your littles to do that?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
funny because now with the teenagers, like it doesn't even matter. They just sleep in
No.
anyway.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
with our littles, it is a little different for us because we homeschool.
Yeah.
And so we actually don't allow them to come out of their rooms until 8 a.m.
Okay.
throughout the week. So they can be in there
Oh, throughout the
reading,
week. I love
building
it. So that's kind of
Legos.
your little quiet time.
Yeah, so I know if I get up at 5, I have
Mm.
3 hours
Ooh.
to read, study, pray. But I
Write
know not
books,
everyone
create
has
podcast.
that reality. Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of people have to get kids to school and have to
Hmm.
get to work. So on Sabbath, allowing that to be your training place and making
Hmm.
sure the kids, as long as they're safe, that they
Yes.
have, you could even do, I've heard of people having special baskets of toys
Hmm.
that only come out during certain times.
Hmm.
So you could put that in their room and say, "Hey, we're gonna rest this morning, so you can play with these, and I'll come and let you know when it's time to come out." Or like those lights that turn different colors. Like
Yes.
green means okay, you can come
Yeah.
out. Again, there's going to be pushback. Same with the screens.
Mhm.
There's going to be
Yeah, there will
pushback, and
be.
that's okay. You,
Hmm.
as a parent, have been given the privilege of raising these children, of
Yeah.
training these children.
Hmm.
God's desire for your family is his gift of rest, and he's going to honor your efforts. So when
Yeah.
it's hard, remember that he's going to honor these efforts.
Yeah. You coined, I think, I'm not sure if you coined it, but challenge us in this book to have intentional unproductivity. Well, that was hard for me to swallow because we are so addicted to productivity in our culture. So, what would that look like then in this culture, in our worlds? Because honestly, I homeschooled for 14 years and I was very busy. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like you're not busy. Homeschooling can
Yeah.
also bring even more challenges because there's so many opportunities. So, if I'm going to implement in my life this intentional unproductivity, what does that look like for me?
I don't believe it has to be a huge thing right away or even a full day set aside for rest.
Hmm.
If for Sabbath, okay, if you can start with 4 hours one day a week, then do that. Start with what you
Oh,
have and grow
love
it.
that.
But I also talk about in the book, I think it's week 3 is Selah pauses. And
I
it comes
know. I
from
saw this. I
that
love
word.
this.
Yeah. So
Yes.
the
Go
word
ahead. Tell
Selah that
us.
we hear in the Psalms, and scholars really debate about what Selah means. And there's different views on it, but most seem to agree that it really is a pause to reflect on what was just said, to
Mhm.
dwell, to contemplate, to even
Mhm.
redirect.
Mhm.
And so it's this concept of these very intentional pauses. And I
Yeah.
believe that's important to bring rest into our everyday. So
Mhm.
currently, for me, that looks like the first thing I do in the morning is sit in silence. Before I
Wow.
start reading, even
Wow.
before like I start forming prayers in my mind, I try to just sit for a few minutes in silence and just feel the Lord's presence
Mhm.
and just delight in him and feel him delighting in me. And again,
Mm.
this takes practice because it's
It
very hard
does.
to still our
It's a
minds. But we
rhythm.
read in
Hmm.
scripture that he will keep in perfect peace
His mind
whose
is
mind is
stayed on
stayed
thee.
on thee.
Love that,
And so it's this
Isaiah.
practice of that, even if it's just a few minutes. And then
Do you get
I'll
out
do
of
some
bed
work.
before you do that, or do you
Yeah,
stay
so
in
good.
bed?
Just I have to. Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
else I'll just fall asleep. So I will start the coffee pot and then
Okay.
I'll pour my first cup of coffee and then I'll sit in silence. And
Okay.
then I'll do some work, some writing, some praying, and then I'll go on a walk outside. That's a very important
By
practice for me
yourself.
as well. Yeah. And this is actually my workout. So, like, I have a weighted pack on, which you wouldn't think was restful,
Ah.
but it's restful for my mind.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to realize we need to rest all these different parts of us, our mind, our spirit, our body, and
It's
looking
good.
for ways to bring that in throughout the day. Other times
Mm.
throughout the day, I will force myself to sit down with a cup of tea and pause,
Hmm.
reflect. So it's bringing in these regular rhythmic pauses of rest
I
and
love
even
that.
building margin into your day between activities because we are so
Mm.
wired by society to go, 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 hustle, 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 and really pack the calendar full
Yeah.
with as much as we can, like a game of Tetris. But I
Yeah.
found that, if we do that, and then we're on our way to an activity and we hit a few red lights in a row and we're running behind, that's when the stress comes. That's when we start rushing and reacting. Well, what if we
Hmm.
built in margin around those activities to really buffer against that and make sure we do have time to sit, to
Yes.
rest, to go on a walk, to reflect on what we just did or the
Hmm.
conversation we just had, and then really to gain perspective before we go into the next thing.
Oh, I think that's so wise. I'm sitting here visualizing your emergency pack, that you had to
Yeah.
have to have with you all the time.
Yeah.
And I just think how relevant that is that we need to have an emergency pack, and maybe not even an emergency situation, but I mean, what is in that pack for your disease? Like what would
Yeah.
happen and what is I'd love to know what's in that pack and parallel that to what we might keep in an emergency pack for ourselves when we realize we're spinning out of control
Yeah.
and
Well,
heading towards burnout.
unfortunately, because it's not like an allergy, it's not
Yeah, it's not an
as easy
EpiPen.
like an EpiPen.
Right.
Instead, because it's such an unknown disease, uncommon disease, it is a vial of a
Oh.
powder of my medicine and then a saline solution. You have to break the vial, shake it up. There's a syringe you have to put in and draw out and do a shot.
Ooh,
Thankfully, I've never had to.
thank
But
God.
because of this, I also have to have like an emergency phone number for my husband in there and
Mhm.
then instructions for if someone
Mhm.
were to find me unconscious, they know what to do.
Right.
Because I love that analogy because it's so true that
Hmm.
rest too is in case we need it all the time. It's preventative, but
It
it is also
is.
in case of emergency. And that's one of the analogies I use in the book. I talk about lichen. So, like
Oh,
lichen that you'll see on rocks and trees.
yes.
Lichen's fascinating. It's a symbiotic
You're
relationship
one of the
between
few people I know that
algae
gets
and
excited about
fungus.
lichen. I
Oh my
love
goodness, I
it.
really do. I like stop and check out
I
all the
can tell
designs
it.
on rocks.
It's your face.
But one thing that they discovered about lichen, it's actually traveled in space.
What?
Yeah, they like strapped it to a spaceship to see how it would do in outer space. And they
Wow.
found that, and then they did further testing on Earth, really just subjecting it to conditions that are space like. And what they found is that when lichen, which again is part plant, part fungus, when it is exposed to extreme conditions, space like conditions, it goes dormant and it will
Ooh.
stay dormant. They believe it could stay dormant for years. So it is really this protective strategy of going into deep sleep. And then when the conditions are good again, it can resurface. And I think it's this beautiful picture for us that, if you're going through trauma, if you're going through grief, if you're going through deep sorrow,
Yes.
you need to accept God's gift of rest. And it's okay. Go dormant for a
Mm,
while, rest in Him. And then when He says so, it's time to resurface.
that's so powerful. I just really need to sit with it for a minute. Really is very, really powerful. It reframes it as
Hmm.
his mercy.
Yeah.
So, like the emergency pack then is filled with his mercy. It's filled with preventative rest. It's filled with wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Because he's given us everything, and the Sabbath was his way of saying, this is how you rejuvenate. But we
Yeah.
just don't pay attention. We don't submit to that wisdom. I'm talking about myself here. It's typically when I am right at the point of toxic burnout, as we have going to be talking about here on the show too. It's like we should recognize earlier on when our blood pressure is way too low. It's just that
Yes.
a lot of symbolism in your story,
Mhm.
and I just think if we can reframe it, and you're reframing it in a really beautiful way, that rest is really his mercy to me. I don't know why I keep hearing that. It's just really his mercy to be able to live and do what he wants us to do in our lives and to enjoy his life. I love that so much.
Yeah.
But you're right, that rest is elusive. And I get that. Like, what do you mean when you say that? I know what I think in my own brain, but rest to me
Yeah.
is elusive. It's, you know, help us understand.
No, it really is because we have been so programmed by society and culture to see rest as laziness and
Yes.
idleness in this hustle
Yes.
culture. Whether someone says it or we just perceive it in our own mind, we feel like if we are taking time to rest, then we are not contributing. We're not
Mm-mm.
getting ahead. We're no
Mm-mm.
longer in the race. We have all
Yeah.
this pressure to perform, to
Mhm.
produce. And that even is God given in a way because he gives us this desire for purposeful
Mhm.
work. We see that
Sure.
before the curse in the
Mhm.
garden. And so God created us for purposeful work, but that is so skewed in culture today
Mhm.
that we just work, 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 work.
I know.
And so I think it really is reframing our mindset around this. And the crazy thing is, when we were preparing to start Sabbathing, I had major doubts. I was thinking, is this actually realistic? Is it even relevant anymore? I knew I
Wow.
wanted it, but I didn't know if it would work because I kept thinking, how are we going to get everything done in 6 days? But God is
Ooh.
so good. And very quickly, what we realized is that we became more productive, more
Ah.
creative,
Mm.
more impactful in our family and our businesses. Like, I
Mhm.
actually get to present on Sabbath to business groups. That's been a
That's
really
crazy,
sweet,
isn't it?
unexpected thing. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Now,
so amazing.
So Christian business leaders, but also in mixed groups without believers. And
Wow.
I don't shy away from how theological rest is.
Mhm.
And I share the story of my husband because so he runs his own company. And when we started Sabbathing, he was a one-man show. We were struggling to pay the bills. We were burned out. And we start Sabbathing. And within a couple of years, very quickly, but now 3 years later, we saw such an impact in his business. So now he has 9 employees, a
What?
big office space. He's got these systems in place. He grew his revenue by 500%, all while Sabbathing with his family. He
How
was
did that
not
make a
hustling on the
difference?
weekends.
How?
Because I believe it's because, and this is what I share when I speak with business groups as well, rest empowers leadership. And
Mm.
it's because God, well, one reason, because God designed our brains to thrive on rest.
Mm.
When we are taking time to contemplate, to allow our brains to grow, to make those connections. So, as I mentioned, one thing we do a lot on Sabbath is read. We might listen to
Right.
podcasts. We often walk through the woods.
Okay.
We don't really take, I mean, personally, we do, but a lot of people don't take time to do this throughout the week. And so, when
Yes.
you're building in that time for restful contemplation,
Mhm.
then when Monday comes, you are ready
Yeah, you have a
to
full
get
tank.
the things done and do them well, you know?
And more efficiently, probably. Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
thinking more clearly. I see that. I could totally see it connect now. That makes perfect sense to me. I love that.
Yeah.
It's
I
amazing.
love that science speaks to it. It's the way God
Science
designed
speaks
our
to it.
brain.
Right, exactly. And that our brains thrive on rest. I need to know more about that. Do you talk more about that in, because, as I said, I'm not privy to hold the book yet. It just come out till May.
Yeah.
Do you address that our brains thrive on rest in this 6-week study? I'm curious.
I looked more into that after I wrote it and as I was
Okay.
presenting to business groups. So it
Okay.
is a presentation that I give.
Okay.
But in the book, I definitely go into how God has designed our bodies and all of nature to thrive through rest in those
Okay.
God given designs.
Okay. I cannot wait. I just can't wait. I'm so eager. Okay. Is it safe to say that this book then is, I didn't know it was going to be a 6-week study, so I was really excited about that. Is it an extension of Rooted in Wonder? Or is it a totally its own standalone? That's what I was
It's
curious about.
completely its own book.
Okay.
And it was really a breakaway from my other writing because my first two books were parenting.
Yes.
And of course, Rooted in Wonder was very focused on this idea of natural theology and
Yes.
teaching and learning through God's designs in nature.
Right.
But it was so sweet because a chapter in Rooted in Wonder is called Family Hibernation. And it is
Yes.
about our practice of hibernating as a family every winter and intentional seasons of rest. And so I can see that even when I was writing that book, God was already stirring this in my heart and preparing me to really deep dive into this concept of rest. So, in a
Yeah.
way, it stemmed from that, but it is a
Mhm.
very different form of book being a 6-week Bible study for adults.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's going to be just amazing. All right. I really, really want to know about the hummingbird. I have been waiting to ask. And so, hummingbird's on the cover, and you said the hummingbird is a strong theme character in this book. So, what am I going to learn about a hummingbird who seems to be going a million miles an hour?
Mhm. So, right in the beginning of the book, I pose the question, what is vital? And I go
Oh,
into my story of going into the doctor's office and my vitals are off. Something's very off.
right.
And so we have to think about what are those vital activities in life? The things that cause us to thrive, the things that really tell us, okay, this is good. We are living the life that God meant us to live for.
Mm.
And I argue that rest is one of those vital activities.
Mm.
And I give the example of the hummingbird. So, just as you mentioned, when you picture a hummingbird, they are constantly in flight. They're going this way, that way, collecting all the nectar from flowers. They seem like they're always busy. And in
Always.
fact, they beat their wings 70 times every second. Like, I
Okay,
can't even
that
picture
is a
that in my
wonder.
mind,
That's
right?
so
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah. So, it's 4,200 times or about that every minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And to fuel that constant activity, their heart has to beat around 1,200 times a minute. It's 1,400% higher than a human average heart rate.
Wow.
So they are flying, their hearts are beating, beating, beating. So,
Racing.
what sustains their activity? It's this strategy that God designed them with called torpor. And torpor
Torpor.
is like a mini hibernation. So there's these physical changes in the hummingbird's body where it's going to go into this deep, deep, unresponsive sleep. In fact, people have found hummingbirds in torpor before and
What?
thought that they're
Dead.
deceased. Yeah. In fact, sometimes they'll be perched on a branch or on a feeder and they'll be so deeply in rest that they'll actually fall and be hanging. They're still clinging to
Oh
whatever they're
my
holding on to,
goodness.
but they're hanging upside down and they're so deep in rest and it's what sustains them. And so it's
Oh.
this beautiful image of God created us for work. Like the hummingbird, we can go from one thing to the next. We can be productive. We're meant to do that. But
Mm.
we have to return to this deep rhythmic rest, this pattern, this
Mm.
harmony of work and rest.
Erin writes, what if we too could support our lives through regular stops? As God designed the hummingbird with restful rhythms, so has He engineered our lives to operate within patterns of rest and activity, cooperating in vital harmony. Maybe you, Heartlifter, feel the deficit of rest. You're just not sure what the restful life that Jesus speaks about in Matthew 11:28 through 30 looks like, or how to get there, or if it's realistic. Maybe we've been thinking about rest wrong, as if it's something we must earn through our efforts and work. Or perhaps rest feels lazy, like we're not pulling our weight or staying as productive as those around us. Okay, Heartlifter, take a moment, let those thoughts soak in as we continue with Erin. So blown away. I'm just so blown away. So how do we do that though? I mean, I really sincerely, I just had a major nerve test on my hand. I've had nerve testing on my feet and I'm like laughing while they're doing it because it's so serious, but I'm like, okay, this really puts, you're on my last nerve to a test and I think, okay, I'm 65. I have literally just burned out my nerves. Like, what's going on here? What is this all about? And I would laugh and say, I don't relax well, I don't rest well, but it's not funny anymore. And so
Mhm.
this conversation was really important to me because I admire you so much and I love the work that you're doing on rest and adding Sabbath, true Sabbath, what does that look like in our lives? Because I just don't know how to rest.
Mhm.
I don't value it. So if you're talking to someone like me, which you are, um, what does that torpor look like in my life? Like what would that mean? How do I This is a very clumsy question.
That's okay. I
You know?
understand what you're saying. And
Okay.
You really put a pinpoint on it there with I don't value it. And
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
true of so many of us.
Okay.
And so I truly believe it's first, we need to start valuing rest as
Mm-hmm.
God does. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of my main aims in the book, is to show how prevalent rest is throughout scripture, that its
Okay.
roots run deep and wide throughout scripture so that we can see how God values rest,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can then value it. And often when I'm presenting on Sabbath and rest, I'll use this visual of a big jar with rocks and sand.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, the jar is a week of our time.
Mm.
And these rocks are the things that we value: faith, family, generosity, health.
Good
And I'll have a
work.
big rock that is rest. And I put it
Mm.
in first, not because it's the most important, but because it's foundational. And then you
Mm.
place the other rocks on top of it. And then I have a bag of sand. The sand is everything else. All
Yeah.
those little minute things, dishes, laundry, text messages, emails, some of it is necessary,
Mm-hmm.
like work that God has called us to, but some of
Yeah.
it's not necessary. Some of it's just
Correct.
distraction. And so
Yeah.
you start pouring the sand into the jar. And what we find is that when we put our values in first, everything else fits in around it.
Yeah.
If we started with the sand, the entire jar would fill with sand and we would have no room for our values, including rest.
No.
But when we start with our values and rest, we find that they always are there.
Right.
And that even less sand fits in. It's a way of filtering out those distractions. And you find that a lot of what you're doing and spending time on, you don't need to be.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is valuing it. And we see that first in Genesis. So rest and Sabbath was hinted at creation in Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
established in the wilderness with the Israelites, and fulfilled at Calvary. And
Mm.
when you look at Genesis, after God creates everything, he rests. But God's day of rest was Adam's first full day. And so we see this pattern that God works and then rests because he wants to enjoy everything that he just made, not because he needs
Yes.
to rest, but he wants to enjoy it.
Right.
While man, Adam, started with rest. So we have to start with rest. We have to
Yeah.
value rest in
Yeah.
order for it to fuel everything that God calls us to.
Yeah. Start with rest. You're so insightful, and I love your pursuit to help us all become intellectually faithful. I remember that much about our first conversation. I just loved it so much, to have this intelligent faith, and understand what God really does intend for us. You have this book filled with journaling prompts, and I wonder if you would lead us through one, if you can choose one.
Yeah. Okay. There's one that I love that I actually use in my life almost every day.
Okay.
And it is based on Psalm 23, which my kids and I recently memorized together. And, like Psalm 23, it's very well known that the Lord leads us by still waters, makes us lie down in green pastures. And that chapter, that daily entry, it really narrows in on the still waters because the original language, that can be translated as restful waters, that God leads us
Wow.
by restful waters.
Mm.
And so the journaling prompt for that day is I ask people to go through Psalm 23. And, it starts with, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Mm.
And so I say, okay, I want you to take that phrase, I shall not want, and place it after each stanza. And I have them write it out.
Oh.
So you say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, I shall not want. He leads me beside still, restful waters, I shall not want. He restores my soul, I shall not want. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake, I shall not want. And you go through the whole chapter that way. And what it teaches you is to go slowly, to pause, and that each of those statements in Psalm 23 remind us that we don't need to want, because want and discontentment is often the driver of hustle and hurry.
Oh, Erin, you must say that again. If you can.
Want and discontent are often the drivers of hustle and hurry. So as we practice being content, we are able to rest in the Lord.
Wow. Okay. I have to close there. It's just breathtaking. Okay. So, heart lifters, I want you to take Erin's suggestion and go through Psalm 23 as she just led us, adding I shall not want after each stanza. And I would just do it several times, maybe several times a day for a while until it starts to settle in. Because I think the way that you brought us to the fact that want and discontent often lead us to hustle and hurry, which is discontent, right, is at the core of our inability to rest. Erin, thank you for telling me about torpor and the hummingbird, and I will be on the hunt to try to find a hummingbird in torpor. That would be the coolest thing ever.
It would.
Just to see that live and in action. I might have to add a couple hummingbird things to my window or something, although is that okay to do? I've heard.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. You want to, hummingbirds, they probably, they'll come close to your windows and you can see them. I would put like reflective CDs against your window to help them know that the window's there.
I like that. Okay. I appreciate it. Erin, Godspeed to you. Thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to hold this book and to share it with all my friends and hopefully do a study with it. May you maintain your Sabbath. May you maintain your peace and your rest as you have a very full plate. Thank you for being with us today and taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Heartlifter Erin's book, The Nature of Rest, What the Bible and Creation Teach Us About Sabbath Living, releases on May 13th, which is perfect for Mother's Day. Pre-order your copy today. I have mine ready, and I cannot wait to receive it as my own Mother's Day gift to myself. I close with these words by Oswald Chambers, the beautiful devotionalist. Erin writes about him in The Nature of Rest. Rest means the perfection of motion. I will give you rest. That is, I will stay you, S-T-A-Y. Not, I will put you to bed and hold your hand and sing you to sleep. But I will get you out of bed, out of the languor and exhaustion, out of being half dead while you are alive. I will so imbue you with the spirit of life that you will be stayed, S-T-A-Y-E-D, by the perfection of vital activity. What? This is a unique perspective on rest. Not idle, but active. Not lazy, but effective and impactful. Have you ever equated rest with being fully alive? End quote. Heartlifter, I can honestly say no. I have no clue, I do not think, on what that might mean for my life to have the perfection of vital activity, for rest to align my daily activities with my deepest values, and have my life organized in such a way that I definitely value those things that are vital. Oh, let's keep this conversation going. It is so good for us. It is going to lead us to a meaningful life. Join me on Instagram at Janelle Reardon or over on Substack at Heartlift Central. And if you'd be so kind, would you make a donation? You can do that at JanelleReardon.com. I'll see you over on Heartlift Central.